Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Employment Podcast. Today we have special guests, Lachlan the old man and Jeremy the young man. Now, Lachlan, tell me, what was the last job you worked in?
I worked as a human resource manager for 40 years. So, for my role as a HR manager was that I interviewed and hired other people. I sorted out people's pay, benefits, and also enforced company policies and procedures. So if someone didn't do what they were supposed to do, I warned them 3 times. Then I fired them. But that happened rarely. Most of the time, people were good workers and left after 5 to 10 years. I also did job analysis if a position needed to be filled.
What's a job analysis?
Job analysis is where you identify the duties, tasks, and responsibilities of a specific role. You need to analyze a job because the future employee taking on the role will need to know their tasks and responsibilities when working for you. How a job analysis is used is to find the needs and the resources the employee will need to perform the job well.
Oh, okay. So what do you do after the job analysis?
Once you get a job analysis done, you would have to write a job description and the job specification. A job description is a short summary of the job which outlines the tasks, duties, and responsibilities of a job. This is important for when a business publishes a vacancy to find candidates who can meet these descriptions, and we need this for when we recruit people online. 20 years ago, we put a job advertisement with the description and specifications with it. A job specification are the skills required for the job, so that a potential employee will know what skills they need for the job. And as mentioned before, it's used with the description for job advertisements. One more thing, with all of this, you gotta do a job design. A job design is when you organize the tasks and make sure they're all related and match the employee's skill sets. It's important because you can't expect a personal trainer to do your plumbing. This is used for effectively achieving the objective of the role.
Job ads on newspapers? That's yesterday. Today, we see job ads on job finder sites like LinkedIn or Seek. Even on social media, we can find jobs.
So, Lachlan, obviously since the 80s there have been a few jobs that have started to disappear. Could you name us a few?
Well, obviously, with the times changing and the technology advancing, there have been a few more jobs that are slowly starting to disappear, including knitting mills, apparel and accessories manufacturing, and footwear manufacturing. I remember when I was a young, playful teenager, those were the jobs I dreamed of having, and now as an old man, those jobs have nearly disappeared.
Jeremy, what would you like to be when you grow up? Could you ever imagine working in a knitting mill? Do you even know what that is?
No, I want to work with technology and become a tech developer. I want to create an app which could make me the next billionaire.
Lachlan, have there been any changes in expectations since the 80s?
There definitely have been. Back in the 80s, we had to go to work every single day, and if we didn't, then we would be punished. Back then, we wouldn't get a sick day unless we were on the brink of death. Back then, there was no such thing as remote learning as technology wasn't as advanced back then. Also, the jobs we did required us to be present in person and couldn't be done online. Another thing that there was no such thing as HR back then. Your manager would gladly make you work overtime without pay, and there wouldn't be anything you could do about it. You'll suck it up and move along. Back in the 80s, if your boss was in a bad mood, no one would dare mess around with them, as you could get fired within a drop of a hat, and again, you'll just suck it up and move along.
Lachlan, well, since the 80s there have obviously been a few changes in the recruitment process. How did you get recruited back in the days?
In the 80s, there was no such thing as social media, so we definitely couldn't find jobs from there. Another thing that wasn't really popular back then was the internet. Therefore, finding jobs on websites was a lot less popular. We personally had to actually go and look for jobs with our resumes, whether that be knocking on others' doors or sending them mail. Of course, sometimes I got rejected, and that was part of the process. As I am a HR manager, I hire people, so I know the whole process. I used to receive a lot of resumes and go through them. The best few resumes I will offer an interview. With that interview, there are a few upsides. Things like seeing them in person and exploring a few aspects of their suitability. But with interviews, you can only interview someone one at a time. and it takes a lot of resources. Another way we hire people was through a recruiter. We don't have to do the interview, but we must pay them a commission. Sometimes there was a position that was filled internally, which was cheaper than finding through a recruiter. We didn't have to do an interview, but when an employer takes another position, we'd have to replace that vacant position externally. Then we choose the right employee and start inducting them. The manager showed them what their job was, and that was it. Maybe the CEO would meet the new employee, but that was only if the CEO was free.
Now, what hours did they work?
Some were part-time. A part-time employment arrangement generally requires an employee to work less than 38 hours per week on a permanent and ongoing basis. Part-time workers are entitled to be paid annual leave, sick leave, and superannuation. Most were full-time though. Full-time employment is the most common type of employment arrangement in Australia. Full-time employees are entitled to be paid annual leave, sick leave, and superannuation. Very few were casual. They got the most flexible work. They chose whatever hours and got paid very well, but they didn't get any leave or benefits. Contractors were rare. If we wanted to build a store, we would put some tradies on a contract. They were also like casuals, but they didn't have flexible hours.
That's great to know. These days, most employees work for a couple of years on a contract and then leave for a better paying job. Was there any discrimination back in your day?
Well, we had to. Why would we hire a pregnant woman who will get all the benefits and not come to work?
But wouldn't you get sued?
Not if you don't mention discrimination. You can't get sued if there's no evidence of wrongdoing, but ripping off workers with unfair pay was much harder to get away with. They would sometimes organize strikes and would have to deal with unions. That's when we learned it's better to pay them fairly than to deal with these groups.
Aren't you not allowed to pay less than the award?
Yeah, even if they agree to it, you gotta pay them accordingly to the award wage.